through. But then while I'm talking, if anyone has any questions, I found that if people just use the chat to post their questions, then once I'm done, I can immediately just go into some of those. So that might be a good way to especially too, because I know sometimes I might say something and you think, oh, I want to ask them about that. And then I ramble for another 20 minutes. And by the time I'm done, you forget what it is that you were going to say. So feel free to just drop anything in chat if it pops in your head.
Yep. So what we have done in the past, Ryan, if anyone wishes to geez, I can't say the word.
Anonymously?
Yeah, that word. Wishes to ask you a question, they can PM me using the chat so I can ask it to you. Of course, if they wish to type in the all chat, that works as well.
Sure.
So yeah, we're going to get started. So thank you everyone for coming. Today is August 8th, 13th, 2020. I don't know why it's the date, but it's for recording purposes. We have Ryan Canuel here, who is the CEO and co-founder of Petricore Incorporated. And he is here to talk about COVID-19 versus the game industry. So Ryan, if you wish to introduce yourself and go at it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan. It's nice to virtually meet you all. I run a small indie studio here in Worcester called Petricore. We were founded in 2015, right as most of us graduated from Becker College, also here in Worcester. So I'll kind of start with sort of who I am and then go into what Petricore is. But so I grew up in a town called Swansea, Massachusetts, which is in the south coast area of Mass near Fall River, which is a city kind of very similar to Worcester. And I grew up there and always played video games as a teenager and really loved them, and learned about Becker and that was something, I could go to school to learn about creating games. And in high school, I had done a little bit of, I played around with some tools that were easy to pick up or free, stuff like Game Maker and like RPG Maker and those, the kind of free, easy to get into game development tools. And I had a lot of fun playing around with those. And I thought, gee, this is something that I really want to do. And I think for me, growing up and as a teenager, when I started playing games too, I was in theater and I always really enjoyed storytelling and that kind of stuff. And when I finally started playing games that had really long, detailed stories to them, role-playing games, things like that, I really fell in love with games even more, because I thought, wow, this is like a combination of so many different entertainment mediums. Like I like to read, I like to watch movies, I like to watch TV, I liked music. I'm kind of a consumer of all forms of entertainment. And I thought, wow, this is like a perfect fusion of all of those things together into one, and you get to choose what happens. And I thought, wow, this is like, and it's just amazing that all this work just comes together to create this thing that you can play and enjoy. And I just thought, this is what I want to do. So went to Becker, graduated. And so this kind of spins into how we started Petricore, but I met a bunch of different people at Becker who were also doing game development, were really talented. And around our senior year, I had done this program that an organization that's a part of Becker, Mass Digi, who I think is the sponsor of this event too, right? So Mass Digi, one half of Mass Digi is someone named Monty Sharma. He started several of his own businesses. He's been a co-founder, founder of different startups, and just really knows a lot about that. And I became close with Monty through Becker and Mass Digi, and he kind of coaxed me to, you should try and start your own company, and you could, you should talk to some other people and see if you can get something started. So it was during a spring break, I think, that I had called up 5 people who I had done, I had met through Becker and really liked working with them on different projects, and said, hey, if we started a company, would you be interested? So everybody said yes, and we got rolling. And that's pretty much how Petricore got started. We from the start have always done a mix of our own games and work for clients. So we do games for other companies, but we also build our own stuff in between that. So the games that we build for other companies is where most of our money comes from. And that's usually like we'll get paid per project, or we have an hourly rate that we charge for our services, and it's just kind of on an ongoing basis. We have some games that we've worked on now for a year and a half, and we do a lot of mobile. So mobile games, as long as they're still bringing in revenue, or as long as people are still investing money into that product, they are usually never done. You just keep working on them. So from there, we got started, and we're pretty much doing the same thing now that we did back then. The only difference is that so now it's been over 5 years since we started Petricore. We are much more expensive than we were when we started, just because there's more talent and we're also older. We need more money. But we also have really built up like the services that we offer as a company and the tools that we use. So there's a lot more value too in working with us. We have several projects, some of which are or most of which are mobile. And we work on, so some of our bigger projects right now, we have 2 casino mobile slot machine games that we work on and maintain. And they're both they use the sweepstakes system. So that's a customer that we work with over in New York. One's just a regular one. The other is celebrity themed. So it's each celebrity has their own slot. So we do stuff like that, and on the complete polar opposite side of that, we do educational games. We did we worked with another company in Boston on a cyber chase math game. We are working with one of the premier ultimate Frisbee players to work on something completely unrelated to that, but he's one of the greatest ultimate Frisbee professional players of all time. So we're all over the place. We have some pretty cool clients and some pretty neat projects that we work on. We have our own game called Dogfight that we started probably about 2 years ago. It's a 3D airplane combat game where all the pilots are dogs, and you're fighting each other. You're fighting cats who have kidnapped the dogs, and that's sort of how you unlock the different characters. So we're working on that project, and that's our own game. But we've kind of put that on hold a little bit to partner with another indie studio. And we're working with a company, Deja Bond Games, on the remaster of a game that they released several years ago now called Ah. It's Ah with 26 A's. They have the Guinness World Record for the longest game name, one word game name. And so that game came out quite a while ago now, and we're working on a remaster with them, which has been great. So it's going to be co-project by both Deja Bond and Petricore. So that's coming along. So that opportunity came up and we jumped on it to work with Deja Bond because they've been building games for a long time now, and we really wanted to partner with them. So that's been fun. So that's Petricore. And to kind of tie it in now to talk a little bit about COVID. So COVID's been an interesting challenge, and I think it's been a challenge for everyone. Sometimes I'll hear people complain about, like certain aspects of it. And it's kind of one of these things that like universally across the board has affected everyone in some way. Like you can't escape it. And like the significance of that has been different for everyone depending on, like what you do and how easily, how much you need to interact with people in your job. We are on the very fortunate end of it that we really do not need to be in the same room together. It's definitely a benefit and we prefer it, but we can get everything done remote. We already at Petricore had a pretty flexible, you can work from home pretty much whenever you want policy. And so that's just become very lax and you work from home every day. And so we've been doing that pretty much since all this started. Right after PAX East was held in Boston, things started to get pretty serious. And that was around the time we just said, all right, everyone's going to work from home. During that time, we have pretty much had no impact on our projects in terms of anything being canceled. We've had some deadlines pushed because we do museum exhibits as well, and those obviously museums weren't open, so that was delayed a little bit, but for the most part that still wasn't that badly impacted. Beyond that, if anything, we've been more busy. We actually are looking at bringing on a junior developer, and we also are looking at bringing on a contractor for another project that we have. We have several projects right now that look like they're going to get started in the next month or so. So we've been more busy now in the time of COVID than we were prior. And I think that it's something that I've heard sort of across the board in the industry for the most part, is that there doesn't seem to be much slowing down. I was definitely much more worried at the start, I think, than as things have progressed. And I think everyone was worried at the start it was something not entirely new in the spectrum of the existence of humanity, but at least within the last 80 years of humanity, it hasn't really been this huge of a concern before. So it was something that was really new, and trying to figure out, I remember we started a policy that was if any of our clients aren't paying their bills pretty much the day that they're due, then we'll be very aggressive about like, you need to pay this or we're going to put this project on hold. We have for if you're a freelancer or a contractor, you bill someone and they usually have 30 days to pay that bill. That's usually the standard. Some companies it's 60, some it's 90, dependent on the size of the company. But 30 is usually the standard in which you get paid on. So we do work, we send the bill, they have 30 days to pay it. And some people, they'll pay as soon as you send it because they just want to get it over with. Some people pay 30 days because, from an accounting perspective, larger companies need more time to move money. And some take longer than that. So the term you may agree on is net 30, but they may take 40 days because they're just slow. And so we became very aggressive early on about 30 days you pay, because there was a fear that someone may be running out of money and they were just trying to stretch things out. But fortunately, that never really was a problem. And so that was one worry. Going remote was a little bit of a concern to stay completely, we had never been a fully remote company, but we've been able to work it out fairly well. And then one of the things that was interesting that kind of popped up due to COVID that some of you might be aware from the news, or if your parents run businesses, or if anyone in your family runs a business, but the government started a program called the Payroll Protection Program, which was a really great program for any small business owner. And you may have seen it on the news because there were a few cases of larger businesses taking it. But I mean, for the most part, everyone that I know in my network who's a small business owner took that money, and it was of a huge benefit. So we took part in the payroll protection program to get some money through that. And essentially what it was is that the government would give 2.5 months of payroll in a loan through a bank that you could apply for forgiveness later if that money was used just for payroll. So essentially you could get 2.5 months of payroll covered by the government, and it was a program in which for places to basically keep jobs. So we were fortunate where we weren't necessarily in a position where we desperately needed that money, otherwise we were going to close. But we were in a position where, and I think still everyone is in a position where we don't really know what the future will hold in this world of COVID. And, if the economy all of a sudden started tanking again and things looked really bleak, it's nice to know that we have that loan that we've been able to get that gives us, an extra 2.5 months of coverage. And so I know a lot of people who took that money as sort of a nice like safety blanket, just not knowing what what the world will hold, and also being able to know secure that you can keep people paid, because that was the primary goal of it, making sure that you could keep people employed. So that was something that came of this that was really great for us, and I know several other people who started or run small game studios took advantage of that, and it also worked out really great for them. So in terms of COVID, it hasn't been one of the worst challenges that we've faced as a company. I will say that we haven't gone without our challenges as a studio. We have had, prior to COVID, we have had instances where we had a one time where we had two customers that were both big customers of ours, both stop working with us for two different reasons. One was that one of our large customers was going through a lot of financial trouble, so they just stopped. They didn't have the work to sustain sending us projects. And on the flip side, another customer of ours was doing so well, and they had so many projects coming in that they wanted to hire their own internal team rather than keep relying on us to do a lot of the work for them. So two completely polar opposite reasons on both sides, but that led to a substantial loss in work for us for a short time. And then we had a few projects pop up that all kind of ended up getting canceled or changed or delayed for various reasons. I remember one of them that was like, I was telling everyone, if we get this, we're good. And if we don't, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And we had a call with that client that day to talk about that project getting started. We were about to sign the paperwork. And then news broke that the company that we were going to be doing that work for had merged with another large company. And the CEO that was going to be taking over put all new projects on hold as they organized and restructured this new larger entity, which effectively killed the project the day that we were about to start it. And so, that was a period of just things just kept going wrong, and we started the year with a decent cash reserve, and we just kept burning money to try and hope that enough work would come in to sustain it, and it didn't. So we ended up having to go through our first and only, fortunately so far, layoff cycle as a company. We had to let two people go, which was sort of the last thing that we wanted to do. But we had reached a point where that was just something that had to be done in order to sustain the business and make sure that the other people who remained could keep their jobs. So fortunately, that was almost 2 years ago now. And since then, we've continued to be able to grow. And, we're in a very good spot now compared to where we were then. But that's kind of one of the problems that pops up as you're running your own company. We're fortunate that has not happened alongside all of this, because I know several people that run retail businesses or restaurants that they're kind of going through that right now. And it seems like a nightmare. I would not want to have to be going through that. So it's very, I feel very fortunate that we're in the position that we are. In terms of the game industry future, so I don't usually like to predict the future. I'm not. I think that there's a lot of different factors that could determine that. But as of right now, if you pay attention to the earnings reports that were just put out by all of the large game studios, games have been selling a lot lately, and it makes sense, right? Everybody's stuck at home. I've been playing more games. I was just thinking about, wow, I've beaten more games in these last few months than I have in years. And it's just people are looking to escape, the time that we're in. People have more free time. They're at home. And so games have just been selling and selling, and, the industry has a lot of money coming into it right now. So I think that is an optimistic outlook of entertainment right now is selling really well. And so it's, as dark as it sounds, the pandemic ends up being a net positive for the game industry, just because there's just so many more people that are taking part in playing games. Now, I do think that it will impact it in some negative ways, though, that aren't always thought about. Like, so, we're all on a Zoom call right now. And it's a fine sort of replacement for some things, but in other ways it isn't. Like the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco just had a digital version, and I didn't really take part in any of it because I thought, I'm not interested. And I think that's kind of the case for a lot of people. And what you really get at these conferences and at like the Game Developers Conference is you get to bump into people and talk to them and meet with them. And it's not something that's usually even prearranged. Like you're in line for coffee and someone else is behind you, and they might see your name tag and go, "Oh, Petricore, like, I'm friends with so-and-so and they work with you on this." And it's like, "Oh, no way. Yeah. Oh," and then just happens all the time at these conferences. And you cannot get that digitally. And I think that will be of a negative impact on generating new business and making new connections for a lot of companies. You can do it online. I've had some new introductory online calls and stuff like that, and that's a decent replacement. But I do think that you lose a little bit of that like in-person human interaction that's missing right now. Also, I think that if this continues to kind of be in like a little bit of a tailspin of people not taking it seriously and things continue to get worse and it has more disastrous impacts on the economy as a whole, I do think that not even, if people don't have money to spend on food, they're not going to spend it on games. And so if people don't have housing, they're not going to be playing games. I think that there are some things that need to be kept an eye on and cannot be allowed to really negatively slip. Otherwise, game industry will be impacted, but several things far more important than the games industry will also be impacted. And so I think that is also just a concern of the economy in general. And I think that if something happens there, no industry is safe from that. And so I think right now I'm positive and optimistic about the games industry. I think all signs point to things going really well, but those are some concerns. And I think I'll end with just a few. I knew that there'd be sort of a larger group of students here, either in high school or in college, who are looking to work in games. And so I just wanted to do 5 tips that I would give for any students that are currently looking to go get a job in games. Now, before I start, I always like to say these are all just my opinions, and I don't know, what I did that worked for me may not work for you. And I say this for anyone who listens to anyone about advice, take everything I say, think about it. Maybe it fits into your personal toolbox of information that helps you. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe one thing will help, the other 4 won't. And that's fine. When you listen to any of these talks where people give advice, I say usually try to take them that way. If something there can really help you and it works and you're happy with it, great. If it doesn't, or you don't think that it's a good fit for you, that's fine. So I always like to warn about that. But so number 1, my first tip, and it's not necessarily related to finding a job in games, but before you really start focusing on trying to apply for a job, I think, and how you can build up your portfolio and everything in games, I think number 1 is you really need to focus on personal improvement. and focus on you first before you start doing any of that. So if there is anything that is holding you back from working on games, if there's anything that is bothering you, if there's if there's anything that you're not happy about, um, working on that and that aspect of yourself before jumping into I need to build up this, I need to do this about my career, I need to do this, like that is sort of like uh the I'm blanking on the word, the lower part of, that you rest the house on top of, the foundation. It is the foundation of who you are. And so if you have cracks in your foundation, if it's not a stable foundation that you try to then build all of this stuff on top of, it's going to collapse. And so I think that personal improvement and looking at yourself and seeing areas in which you can always be improving on is huge, and it's important. And everybody needs to take that time to do some self-reflection and sit and think about ways that you can become better. And so I think while you're a student in school, you have the most amount of time to do that self-reflection and figure out who it is that you want to be, what is it that you want to do. You may go through game school and end and not want to ever work in games again and do something totally different, and that's fine. Most of the people who work in games didn't go to school for games. It didn't exist. A lot of the older people that work in games have history degrees or political science, or they were lawyers, or so that's fine. But number one, I think, is work on yourself before you start trying to build all this stuff, and make sure that you're happy with that. Number two is work on games, make stuff, have a portfolio of work. This is huge, right? I think that one of the best things that you can do as you're starting and as you're thinking about, I want to do this and I want to get into games, I want a job in X or Y. If you want to be a user interface artist, let's use that as an example. You can very easily go on Google and search junior user interface portfolio, or like user interface artist portfolio. And if you go and you start looking, those are the people that you're competing with for a job. That is who will those are the people that will be also applying for the user interface positions that you will be applying for. And they then serve as the example of the threshold that you need to meet in your work. And so as you work on it, that is the level that you're trying to reach. If you find portfolios that are really, really high quality, that are really nice, look at those, examine those, figure out like, what is it about these? Like, find talks, listen to, you can go search on YouTube, GDC, Game Developers Conference Vault, UI talks. And this goes for anything, graphics programming, narrative design, any element of games. You can go, the Game Developers Conference has been going on for 30 years. There's so much knowledge there that you can find great talks on. Go and look them up, listen to them about whatever it is that you're interested in doing. You can learn so much from those people who have been doing this for a really long time. We just watched a talk as a company this afternoon, actually. Go and listen to that and then work on stuff. Take what you learn and make things. You only get better by practicing. Artists only get better by making more art. Programmers only get better by writing more code and making mistakes and learning how to do things. The more that you do, the better you can get at it. And the more that you can put into doing that, the better. And the more that you'll have to show when you apply for jobs, because we always ask, give us your portfolio. What have you worked on? And we look at it, and you can very easily tell someone who just went to classes and they just did what was assigned and they never worked on anything outside those, versus someone who has 6 games in their portfolio that are all really high quality and complete, and you can go and find them and download them and play them. We play the games that if someone submits and they have games on their website that we can play, we play them, and other places will too. So stuff like that, really think about putting as much stuff forward that you've worked on. Number three, and you are going to hear this if this is the first time that you're hearing it, it will very quickly be burned in your mind. But networking, and you will hear this a million times after me, or you've probably already heard it a million times before me. But networking is the most important thing I think that you can do. And one thing that isn't always talked about with networking, but I think is important, is that people can do it in different ways, and it depends on what you're comfortable with. I really like the handshaking, kissing babies kind of networking, the go and meet, and I like to go meet people for coffee. I don't mind going to networking events. They're not my favorite. I prefer kind of one-on-one or like more intimate interactions, but the larger events are fine too. I don't mind that. I know people who freeze up at these large events and really just are not comfortable at them. And that's fine. Like, find out what works for you. If the more the one-on-one sit down, grab coffee, grab a beer kind of thing works, great. Do that. If you're not good at that, game developers, I hate Twitter. I can barely, I hate keeping up with like technology and the 100 different ways that there's people can message you. I can't keep track of it, but I know people who use Twitter so effectively to network with other game developers, and they have all these friends that they've made just through Twitter, just through like reaching out to all these other game developers through Twitter and getting to know them, and that works for them. Doesn't work for me, but other people use it super effectively, and they build huge networks through Twitter of people that they know. So you just need to find where your community is, and what works for you in order to build that. Networking is not about going to an event and handing out business cards and getting as many people to just take them. It's about making an impact on someone, and it's also about becoming friends with people, right? Like, networking is the friends that you have that work in your industry that you can rely on to help you at times and that you can help at times. And so I think that approaching it that way and thinking, these are my peers, these are people who I'm going to work with, these are my future coworkers, these could be future people that I work for that work for me. You never know. So I think when you go to these networking events, just think about, you're just there to get to know people. You're just there to make friends. The first few times that you go to an event, and so this is obviously a different world now, but when events start happening again, you don't even need to talk to people. You might talk to one or two people. You may just stay with your friends. But people will slowly start to recognize if you keep going to things like you're that, they'll remember your face. The first networking events that I went to, I didn't really talk to people that much. Some of the best ones, if you're just starting out as a student and you're not comfortable going up and talking to people, find some of the events where it's a showcase and people will come to you. So if it's an event where you can set up your game at like a table and people will come to you, that is an awesome way to start, because then if you're not comfortable going up and initiating conversations all night, people who are will come over to you. And it also makes it so easy, because even if you're not good at coming up and starting a conversation, if someone's sitting at a table with their game on a laptop and you come over and be like, hey, I'd like to play your game, that's easy. Like, everyone can do that. So you don't even have to talk to each other. You can just play the game and leave. So events like that were kind of how I started, and where I became comfortable was, you'd stand at your booth and people would come to you and you could talk to them about your game. It also gives you something to talk about, because sometimes I think when you're a student and you're just starting at these events, it's hard. You may not always know what it is to talk to someone about yet. And so if you're there with a game, you can at least, you have that to talk to them about. And then they may ask, where do you go to school? What is it that you're, and then conversation will come from that. So that's number 3, is network. And then off of that, these two are kind of related, but number 4 would be find mentors. And this kind of comes from networking, but this can also come in other ways. So as I mentioned, Monty Sharma from Mass Digi, he's a mentor for me. And I turn to him fairly regularly for advice on things, and he's helped us in a ton of ways. Petricore would not exist as a business if it were not for Monty's help. Um, and so finding people like that who can help you in your chosen career path is huge. And you may find those people, you may get an internship somewhere and you're working for someone who just is really knowledgeable and wants to help you, and they become your mentor. Or a professor that you have in school, which was kind of the case, was how I met Monty. Or someone that you meet online, or someone that you meet in an event, or there's any number of ways. If you go on Twitter, and you search like game development mentorship, there are always people who are offering. I'm happy to speak with young students who are up and coming, and these might be people who very senior, like worked on huge AAA games, and you might think that they're so out of reach for you to talk to, but they're putting themselves out there saying, hey, come talk to me. I want to, because I think people who build up this knowledge base and they make a ton of mistakes to get there, and they learn a lot, and all they want to do is pass that down and see future generations not make those same mistakes and take the things that they've learned and carry those forward. And so don't be afraid to reach out. I have people reach out to me that are in kind of the same spot that I was in 5 years ago. And I'm always happy to help that, because I remember what that was like. And I know that how uncertain things are and questions that you have. So it's kind of is like a repeating cycle that feeds into itself. But finding people like that can be huge, just because it'll help you have people that you can turn to get advice on aspects of what it is that you want to do. So if you want to be an environment artist and you can find a really talented environment artist to help guide you, that's great. And it doesn't even need to be like an aggressive, we talk every day. It could just be, and what it really should be is just maybe every month or two you check in and say, hey, how's it going? I hope that you're doing well. I was thinking of you, and I've been working on my portfolio. I've been working on my environment art. I made these 3 pieces. I know you're super busy, but I would just really, really appreciate if you could just take a look at these and tell me what you think. Like, what are some ways that I can make this better? If it's just someone who you can have that relationship with, and have someone who can help guide you, that is huge. And there are tons of people who are more than happy to spend the time and put the time into helping you with that. So if you can find someone like that, find someone who you like, it's great. When we were getting started, there were several mentors who I would turn to from different aspects of business, who there were people who I didn't get along with, who maybe weren't a good fit, and they just weren't the right mentor for us. And then others who I like really hit it off with and just loved their feedback and became mentors for us. So that's a huge one. And there are plenty of places that you can try and find them. And then lastly, and then I'll move into the questions, but I think the last thing is, as you're starting to find your footing and find a job and working games, you need to kind of go through a little bit of a process of unlearning being a student and start learning sort of being a professional working in games, and the differences between those two. So as a student, you might be used to a teacher assigning you work, you do it, you follow the rules, you do whatever it is to get the grade. Great. When you're off and you're working on your own, you're in a company, you may not always have as much direction. It may be more loose. You may need to find stuff to do. And taking the time to kind of settle into that and unlearn some of the, I get told to do X, I do X. Is it good? Yes, no. Unlearning some of that and learning some, think for yourself, find work for yourself to do, keep yourself busy, is huge. And also just how you approach things. I have found, as time's gone on, and I noticed this, you kind of start to learn a little bit more about how things function and work as you work your way up in the beast of what it is. And so I think that taking a step back and knowing what you know and what you don't know is huge. Um, Sometimes things may seem like they happen for no particular reason at all within an organization. So the place you go to college, let's say, things may frustrate you about certain decisions that are made and things that happen. But without being a part of that decision making process or being in the room or understanding what goes into that, it's very easy to like Monday night quarterback, kind of like, oh, if all these decisions had been made, it's, if you weren't there for it, once you are there for it, you can kind of look at it with a new sense of appreciation, like, so it's not just that easy. Um, and so I think that's a part of when you're a student, you may not necessarily have to really like you're sort of at the bottom of the rung at the time, right? You haven't had a chance to work your way up and see some of the decision making and what goes into it. And so it's just something to think about. I always like to take a step back, and now before I criticize a decision that was made, or so, like something of someone that, put myself in their shoes and go, oh, okay, like that probably wasn't an easy decision to make. And so it's something that I think can really help you try to think about what someone else in a different position than you or higher up than you might be thinking about. And so from that, that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through. So I think now is probably a good time to run through questions people might have.
Do you want to take your pick at them? There's a bunch of them in chat.
Sure. Let's go. All right. What has been affected more overall, AAA companies or indie? So AAA companies have all reported substantial revenues. So I think Nintendo had like a 400% increase. EA did really well. Activision did really well. Like all the large game studios have all done fairly well. Now, it depends on how you define impacted, right, though, because those are really large teams that have now had to move remote that might not work that as well as an indie team. So there's like ways that some haven't been impacted and some that they have. So like a large 500 person, like Rockstar, for example, 1,000 person team working on Red Dead 2, all of a sudden everyone's remote. That is a huge impact to that company. Their games might be selling more and making more money, but the stuff they're working on is going to be delayed and possibly significantly because they've had to now transition this massive team that like has all this software and special stuff on their computers at work. Now they're home now, like, and if they have young kids. And so from a financial perspective, indies probably have been impacted more because it's harder to make deals. You're usually smaller, money's tighter. But working from home, like indie teams are usually distributed, they're small, it's easier to make that transition. So it's different for everyone in different ways. Plus, we're indie, so I can only really talk to our experience. I don't know what might be going on in some AAA. As an indie studio that also does contract work, how do you balance between working on proprietary products versus doing contract work? So that's a great question. And people always ask that, and I don't think we do a great job balancing. And I think every studio that I talk to always has a different way that they try and balance it, and they're never happy with the way they do it. So for us, we try and our priority is, if it's a client project, that's a higher priority than our own stuff. And that makes it really hard to do our own stuff, because if there's a lot of client work, people just can't find the time to work on our own projects. But the client work is where most of the money comes from. And especially as we've gone through moments of we're running out of money and we have to let people go, I've become I try and find whatever client work I can to just keep money coming in, because you never know when things start slipping and you're running out. So that's how we chose to balance projects, is client work always takes a priority, and working on our own projects is something that happens in the absence of client projects. So if there's a 2-week gap between projects, like right now we have a developer on the team who he finished his stuff. He's got a new project that's signed, but we're waiting on some stuff. So in between that gap, he's working on Dogfight. And so that's how we tend to balance it. Let's see. I'm really curious what some of the early days of starting Petricore were like. What game you worked on first, how you decided on that project, and what you planned versus how things ended up. So the early days were definitely a lot looser than what we became, and that was just out of the fact that we were just getting started and we were figuring all this stuff out. And that's where like a lot of traditions of us as a company also formed, which I look back and that's still my favorite part of the company, just when everything was uncertain and crazy. So when we started, we were really fortunate that we were trying for a few months before we started the official company to find a client project, because we knew that was how we were going to fund the company. So through Monty Sharma, my mentor, he put me in touch with someone that he had met who wanted to build an app. And he vouched for us and said, hey, you can trust them. You should talk to them about this. So we started talking to him. He was a vascular surgeon. He wanted to build an app. And so we kept talking to him, and we finally settled. We had a contract. We were ready to go. And we signed that project. And I remember when we were signing the contract, he asked, is it Petricore LLC or Petricore Inc.? And I said, well, I don't know yet. We're not formed. And so that was how lucky we got, where we had this project even before we were set up as a company. Don't do that, because then it could potentially come back to hurt you. But it worked for us. So we ended up as Petricore Inc. But we got that project, and I remember we had the first check the day after we started the company. I set up the bank account, and I put that first check in, and it all kind of lined up all too perfectly. I don't think that it could have happened any better than it did. And a lot of that is luck. And then how we decided our first game, we actually had a meeting where we were trying to figure out what it is that we were going to do. And everyone from the team came and had some pitches. And our lead designer, Oliver, had a pitch for a puzzle game called Mind the Arrow. And he basically did a prototype in PowerPoint for the game. He made slides just showing like how the game would work and explained it. And we were like, wow, that's like really clever. It was a unique mechanic. It was kind of like Simon Says, but where it would twist and spin around. So it was like Simon Says plus a memory game, or like it was like memory plus location. So that was how we ended up. That was how we settled on our first game. Was we just had a meeting and we pitched stuff, and when we finally heard one that we all were like, "That's so cool," that was how we started on our first game. And really, the only ground was it needs to be something really small and something we can build really quickly, because we were a small team and we wanted to get a game out fast. So we started that alongside client work, and we had that game out in 4 months. And so I think that we did a lot wrong with that game, but we did, if I go back and say anything like we did really right, was we got a nice polished, nice little game that we did really quickly, and we got it out, and we got best new game feature from Apple. They named us one of the best games that month. We got named one of the best iPhone games on the planet by a Tech Radar magazine. And like I said, we built that game in a month, but we really got it nice. And so that we did really, really well. And so that I think was a good thing that we did with that game. It was not a financial success in any means, but as getting the company some attention, that it worked well for that. So that's how that's how things kind of ended up how they did.
Just really quickly, we have about 10 minutes left. So everyone, I'm going to be posting a feedback form. So if you get a chance, fill it out. Yeah, I'll leave. That's all I wanted to say. You can go back to your questions.
Awesome. All right. What has been our hardest challenge? Definitely the layoffs that I mentioned. That was definitely the hardest moment in the history of the company. That's something that I wouldn't wish on anyone. We were fortunate that we're a younger group, so no one really had like a house mortgage or a family. But as I get older, that's something that I think about is, oh God, if I had to do that, knowing that this was like someone's like livelihood and they had people to care for, that would have been much, much harder than it was. And it was already very hard and kept me awake a few nights before I had to do it. So that was probably our hardest challenge. Do you think that gaming companies' job hiring will be on pause for graduating college seniors? That does not appear to be the case. I see more places hiring now than ever before. And a lot of those positions are sort of more senior, but they're also hiring junior. And just one thing off of that, even if a place doesn't have a job listed for a junior position, it is always worth reaching out and sending your portfolio because like right now we don't have a position up that we're looking for a junior developer, but we are. I'm just like, we're kind of getting that rolling. But if someone emailed us, if someone emailed us on our website, petricoregames.com, info@petricoregames, and sent us their programming portfolio and said, I'm looking for a job as a junior developer, it would definitely be strongly considered right now because we are looking for one. So, you never know. If there's a game studio that you're interested in, send it. What's the worst? They're going to come back and say, we're not hiring right now, and try again later. Like, that's the worst that'll happen. They're not going to say anything mean to you. So just, give it a try. But I think, to answer the question more specific, I don't see hiring slowing right now, just because there seems to be a lot of money getting sent around, and there's a lot of places that are hiring. I see more seniors from Becker getting jobs than ever before. Do I think PAX will run this year? No. PAX is going to be digital for the one on the West Coast, and PAX East. No, it's too many people. I don't think that it'll happen until there's a cure. Let's see. Are there really good networking events that I would recommend? Yes, definitely. So I can only really speak to the ones around here and then like the big global ones, but I will post in chat because it's a weird link. But it has all of the events that happen in Boston. So I will post that in chat. So that is a good place to go, and you can find all of the networking events that happen in Boston, and they are all good ones. Women in Games Boston is a great one. Boston Unity Group is great. Boston Postmortem is great. Boston Indies is really good, and that's a great one to start at because there's some really that's usually like smaller indie. They have like a showcase that they do, which is great. The VR and AR meetups, I don't go to those really. But if that's something, if you're really interested in VR, that's a great one. They have one for audio. The Unreal is great if you're interested in Unreal development. So any of these are great. And then if you keep scrolling down, they also have the annual events. So they have PAX East there. The Boston Festival of Indie Games is also great. And I don't think they're going to have it. I know they're not going to have it this year. But That is also a great one. That is all local companies, indie studios showing their games. It's another one where it's so easy to go up and talk to people. It's also people from all over. So there's like people who come down from Montreal, they fly in from across the world. It's a small local event, cheap to go to. Becker usually does a shuttle if there's interest. So I always recommend, like, they're not going to do it if no one expresses interest. But if enough of you say, hey, like, we really want a shuttle, or, wherever you may go to school, try to get them to provide some transportation to it. Check out stuff like that. And then, of course, and like anything Mass Digi does, I highly recommend the game challenge, the made in mass party at PAX, which won't happen, but anything like that, highly recommend. Let's see. How big did Petricore start out in terms of employee count? And do you think that it worked well / was an ideal size for what you were setting out to do? Is there any changes you would have made to the initial team role composition if you could go back? So that's a great question. I always push this on people that I made a terrible mistake in starting the size of Petricore that we did. It worked. And we were able to exist because of it, but or not because of it, but we were able to exist besides it. But starting out with, there was 6 of us when we started, is really big. And if you think about it, like, it doesn't take much thought to know that it would be really big, but we just didn't even think about that. In that, even if like we were each getting paid $30,000 a year, that's already $150,000, and like $30,000 a year is less than minimum wage. And so, it's a lot. I mean, I think the first year that we were in business, we brought in maybe $50,000. So, I mean, it's just really tight, and we really went through the ringer early on in terms of just like having money, not having money, having money, not having money. And it was just this constant, like, no one was an employee early on. Everyone was a contractor. But that, it just was like, we can pay people in equity this month, but we don't have any money. It was just, I wouldn't want to go through that again. And so I would say start out small. Start out as small as you can, because you can always bring more people on. It's way harder to get rid of people. So you can start with, like, if you're building a game that's really art heavy, then you need like a full-time artist maybe, and then you're the programmer or whatever. Whatever you need, like, complementary to your skill set. But like, if you just need like 5 minutes of audio and that's it, you don't need a full-time audio person in your team, right? Like, you can subcontract that out. People are contractors. You can pay that person for, a week of work that they put into creating this, or, like, whatever you need. Be really like cognizant of like, how much do I need from certain roles, and really only have full-time owners of the company be the core people that you need to get that done, / the people that you want to keep working with on project after project, versus like bringing people on full-time. And it worked for us. We were able to do it, but it was really hard. And I would rather, and I would recommend to everyone, start as small as you can and then grow from there, versus starting really big. Because I do see a lot of student teams that start out really big, and it's tough. And it looks like I answered all the questions, and we are at the end.
Exactly. It was
perfect.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ryan, for coming. So I'm going to so everyone say thank you in chat if you can. I'm going to leave open the meeting for a few minutes for everyone to fill out the feedback form. But apart from that, everyone is free to go. Thank you very much for coming. Is there anything you'd like to post, Ryan? Any things? Any at all?
Uh, no, I think that that's it. If you're interested in our stuff, it's just petricoregames.com, and that has some of our client projects and some of the stuff we're working on now. Plus, that would also be where you can fill out the contact form, and that goes directly to me. So, um, yeah, no, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So I'm going to keep this open until 3:05. So please get the feedback form in if you haven't done so. And if you don't wish to, that's fine. But it helps us with our creating stuff. Thank you, everyone, for coming. All right. I think that's a wrap.